to Postcards from Barnesville. I'm Pamela Morris, that witchy chick. This is the place where I will share some of the short stories I've written over the years that may otherwise spend their dark lives feeling lonely and unloved. And nobody wants that. Happy Groundhog's Day, or as my witchy friends like to celebrate it as Imbolc, which is the halfway point between winter and spring. This is the final planned episode of Postcards from Barnesville. It's been fun recording and presenting all these audio short stories to you, and I hope you've enjoyed more of them than you haven't. I'm sure there's some in there that you don't like, because that's how short stories are. I am hoping to get back again to do a season 2, as it were, but for the time being, I've got other projects going on that I need to work on instead. And not to mention, I actually need to write more short stories that I can actually share here. So there is that. In regard to this final episode, in the past year, I've been getting a better understanding of one of my phobias, which is spiders. I hate spiders, but why? It's the legs. The long, spindly way their legs move just creeps me out to no end, which leads me to be pretty uncomfortable with all things tall and thin and spindly, like Slender Man, like the tall man from the Haunting of Hill House series on Netflix. That was terrible. Absolutely terrible. And if you're a gamer, Siren Head. I can't play the game. I've watched people play it, but no. Okay, that leads us into the topic of giants. And, I don't mind the tubby ones. They're kind of Santa-like. But the skinny, gangly ones, that's a big no. But there's got to be a way to kill these things, right? But if killing them brings even more unseen danger, what then? And so that's why I have called this one On the Dangers of Slaying Giants. I hope you enjoy. Their legs were as big as telephone poles. Their arms would have been more home on a daddy longlegs, jointed and spindly, knuckles nearly dragging the ground, and claws that could easily have acted as giant plows across the open fields they roamed. They had 4 limbs, carried themselves upright, giant humanoids moving along distant horizons, head and shoulders above the swaying, shuddering branches of massive oaks and towering pines. Sometimes they trod slow and steady, picking a careful path as they searched for sustenance. They batted at birds, occasionally striking one from the sky as we would a fly or mosquito. Squirrels and chipmunks would be plucked from trees as they chattered and chirped, trying to alert those around them of the danger. Chickens tried to run, but were lifted like juicy, sweet blueberries picked from the bush and popped into an eager, toothy mouth. They grazed, taking life after life into their drooling maws lined with teeth the size of garbage cans. Other times they scurried, rapid, skittering, like spiders lunging across the giant web towards a newly entangled bit of prey. They could cover miles in minutes. The ground around them trembled. Ripples vibrated on the surface of lakes and ponds and puddles. They stank of unwashed flesh, excrement, foul breath, and the corpse rot that often clung to their lips, chins, and fingers, no matter how much they tried to lick them clean. Aliens. There was no other explanation. They were aliens that crouched low to peer into the homes of our windows as a child might a doll's house. How we longed to be rid of them. We wondered where they came from, how, when, why. No ships had come from the sky. Nothing enormous and foreboding had hovered overhead as a warning to the inhabitants of Earth. The oceans had not spewed them forth in surging waves of tsunamis. There were no signs they dug their way up from some enormous subterranean realms, as the hollow earth theorists kept pushing people to believe. Some suggested they were from another dimension. There was one consolation to these giant visitors. For the most part, they avoided consuming the planet's human inhabitants. Oh, an occasional incident would occur, but even then, the one devoured was more times than not spit out, half chewed, the body a mangled glob of twisted limbs, blood, guts, partially severed tendons, and ripped skin. The giant thing would cough and spew and retch. You didn't want to be around when it happened for any reason. Best to just stay out of the way, sheltered and protected from the gory projectiles until the creature was finished and had moved on to a safer distance. Once the coast was clear, the witnesses could rush out, retrieve the discarded remains of the deceased, and hurry it back under cover to deal with. No amount of military intervention had stopped the beings. The nations of the world had tried. Tanks, missile, all manner of bombs, save for the big ones, that would only end up destroying everything else in the process. Monstrous flamethrowers had managed to set one of the beasts on fire, but that had only ended up igniting the entire west coast of Northern California in the process, as the flaming giant had run, flailed, and rolled among the giant redwoods in an effort to put itself out. It eventually flung itself into the Sacramento River and had been doused, but that didn't do much to save the trees or its own life. The stench of burning flesh on top of the raging forest fire sent everyone scrambling for safety. The evacuations were quickly implemented. It took 2 months for the air to become breathable again. The dead aliens' fellow invaders didn't seem to care one way or another about the demise of one of their own. They stayed clear of the area until the flesh and bones sank and were carried downstream into the bay. No one dared fish in those waters for a very long time. In China, they tried to poison the things, dosing up hundreds of heads of sheep, cattle, and pigs with what should have been a deadly stew of chemicals. Nothing that the greatest minds in the world could come up with seemed to faze the invaders. What about us? One scientist dared to speculate as they neared the 2-year mark since the first of these giants had appeared. What about us? One of his companions asked. They don't eat us. They gag and they vomit. They spit us out. You think we're poisonous to them? A third party dared query. Why else would they leave us alone? We're small. God knows we're easy to catch, yet they don't eat us. And we've all seen or heard what happens when they've tried. The room hung with a queasy silence. The tick of the clock on the wall resonated with unspoken, stomach-churning thoughts. Who? One hesitant voice finally risked asking. How many? A fifth scientist muttered. How would we get them to eat? Uneasy throats were cleared. The second hand swept across the clock's face. Cold layers of sweat popped on troubled and creased foreheads and trickled down pulsing temples. Prisoners, was the first suggestion. Lifers, the ones on death row. Heads bobbed. They're going to die anyway. May as well try and put them to some good use. Suggestions were given. Papers were drawn up. Meetings were held. World leaders met. Decisions were made. You have been listening to On the Dangers of Slaying Giants by Pamela Morris. If you're enjoying this tale and would like more, visit my website, PamelaMorrisBooks.com, for a full selection of my available novels and collections. Link is in the description below. Now, let's get back to the conclusion of On the Dangers of Slaying Giants. Volunteers from the wretched bowels of the world's most unscrupulous inmates were chosen. Where there weren't enough volunteers, the unwilling were drafted. There were protesters. All life is sacred, their signs flashed. Save the giants, others proclaimed. There were far, far more that did not protest. The towering beings were making quick work of almost every form of animal protein the world had to offer. The world's ecosystem was marching towards collapse. Facilities once used for processing of beef and pork set to work grinding up the sacrificed mass murderers, child rapists, serial killers, and psychopaths of the world by the thousands. It was nearly impossible to find willing professional butchers to hack and saw through human flesh and bone. But there were enough other sickos still out there to make up the difference. Them and a few brave surgeons. They axed off heads, lopped off arms and legs, separating all the joints for ease of handling, and fed the grinders. They filled the evacuated bellies of steer, hogs, and goats with raw human sausages the size of meter-long salamis. Disemboweled chickens and turkeys, feathers intact, were crammed full with smaller versions. In the earliest hours of pre-dawn, the livestock corpses, now sewn shut to prevent their spillage, were hauled to the wide-open fields by the truckloads and scattered in among a few of their living counterparts used as bait. It was gruesome work, but would it prove fatal? When the sun rose and the invaders emerged from wherever it was they slept during the hours of darkness, they would begin with the most important and apparently most loved meal of the day, breakfast. Their automobile-sized feet crashed through fields, forests, and deserts. Lakes were waded through, rivers crossed as easy as you or I would jump a temporary rushing of water through a street-side storm gutter. Their rancid breath would heave from yawns of hunger, filling the air with aromas so fetid that those who happened to be nearby would be reduced to coughing and gagging. The first stuffed pig would be found by these monstrosities in an isolated rice field just outside Tokyo. Famished and still groggy from sleep, the aliens paid little attention to the creatures they harvested for their morning meal. The pig was plucked up, popped into a cavernous mouth, barely chewed, and swallowed as quickly and easily as we might eat a grape. The squeals of its living companions sent shivers up the spines of those who dared bear witness. China, India, the Middle East, and Europe checked in that the traps were being taken. Africa, the United Kingdom, Canada, and the Americas all posted equal successes. The world held its breath. Gas masks probably would have worked a lot better. The first noxious bowel rumbling struck less than 12 hours after the first pig was devoured whole in that Japanese paddy field. The towering owner of that unsettled and pained stretch of digestive tract sank into a groaning ball of agony beside a stream that fed into a river that flowed into Tokyo Bay. The creature belched, it vomited, it farted, and it shat a variety of fluids so foul even the others of its kind wouldn't go near it. It roared and bellowed as the toxins it had fed on took hold in its bloodstream. The liquid waste of the illness trickled into that same stream by which the invader eventually died. The same pattern soon followed, traveling east to west across the globe, giants collapsing where they stood, clutching their enormous gurgling guts as the pungent fumes of equally as large amounts of intestinal gas, puke, and diarrhea were released into the atmosphere, the water supply, and the soil. Within 48 hours, there was not an invader to be found upright. By 72 hours, it appeared as if all of them were dead. Bonfires were lit. The bodies of the intruders were burned where they had died. The smoke of burning alien flesh, black and greasy and ripe with death's body odor, fouled the air even more. Inside their air-conditioned laboratories, the scientists watched from behind glass windows or over surveillance footage or simply on the news. The World Health Organization sent in air, water, and soil quality reports. Contaminated dead zones were scattered everywhere. Water undrinkable. Soured earth that would not yield any kind of plant life took over rice, wheat, and cornfields. Fruit orchards and vegetable farms withered into black, gooey, inedible produce if they were within 5 miles of where one of the huge corpses had fallen ill, poisoned by the toxic bodies of the Earth's human inhabitants. At first, the scientists patted themselves on the back. They'd saved the world from the alien giants, after all. They'd saved the world from the invaders by feeding them humanity's most repugnant and indigestible members. In return, the corpses of the fallen had poisoned the Earth's flora to the very brink of extinction. Sometimes life isn't fair. Nobody had really considered the dangers of slaying giants. You have just listened to Postcards from Barnesville with Pamela Morris, that Witchy Chick. A place for free short stories that otherwise may have spent their dark lives lonely and unloved. Please subscribe and hit that like button if you enjoyed this reading and to keep the stories coming. Be sure to check your mailbox for another postcard from Barnesville, from that Witchy Chick soon. And thank you for listening.